afternoon. Thank you for coming to Word Plays. We are Story Circle of the Capital District, and we are in our 15th season here at Proctor's.
Yeah.
Every program we have a different topic. Today's topic is For Better or Worse. And we have a collection of folktales, personal stories, historical story, and a literary story, all on the topic of for better or for worse. Now, I thought, when I came, Siri and Joe and I are, Siri Alice and Joe Diddle and myself, Kate Detting, are the producers of Word Plays, and we come up with titles. And when I came across For Better or for Worse, I thought, oh, and it's just a few weeks after Valentine's Day, it'll be a lot of marriage, wedding. But I don't think so. There's a lot of for better or for worse in life. Yes, life is perhaps just a series of that. Housekeeping. Please silence your cell phone. And if it vibrates, don't make too much noise. Okay. There are 2 private bathrooms here, and then there are the larger bathrooms outside. We will be taking a small break in the middle, sort of a stretch break where you can use those facilities, or whenever you need, of course. So I think that's all we need, and we're very happy that you come. That we've been Zooming for a season and a half, and it's not the same.
I agree.
And if you're a teller and you say something funny and no one's laughing, it's very disconcerting. For myself, I go, did I forget something? Anyways, so we're happy to see as much of your faces as we can, and we can hear your laughter. We do ask, everyone will be masked except when you're sipping some water, or the performers will be unmasked, because you'll miss a lot if you can't see if we're smiling or so forth. Okay. So the topic is for better or for worse. To link the stories together, I asked each of our tellers the same question. If your story was a kind of music, what would it be? Our first teller is Nancy Marie Payne with a folktale from Iceland called The Wager of the Wives. And when I said, what kind of music, she answered, dissonance, such as in the theme from Jaws. Nancy Marie Payne.
I don't usually explain my stories, but I think this one's got an interesting evolution. When Kate gives us these, I go through my little card catalog. What have I got that fits the title or the topic, or I can make fit the title or the topic? And I have never told a tale from Iceland. I don't know anything about Iceland. But I sent her the title, which is The Wager of the Wives, that I've read. But then when I started researching my story, it's from Brothers Grimm. They had it in their anthology. And their title is Who is the Foolish-est? Which is why I prefer The Wager of the Wives. Also, a folktale from Iceland is on the small side. You can get witch stories and magical stories and animal stories all over the place. So I was very happy to find this one that is a folktale. In Iceland, there is a large, flat plain with a village. And if you live in this village, any window you look out of, as long as you're looking to the east or the north, you will see the sunrise and watch it go through its day all the way until it sets. Nothing disturbs your view. In this village, there were 2 families side by side, and the husbands were the best of friends. They both worked for the same employer. They both had the same sense of humor. They both liked the same kind of ale. But their wives, now that was a different story. All their wives did was argue. Now, most wives would argue to say, well, what I have is better than what you have. Okay, not these two. They argued to prove they had the worst than the other had. And that worst was their husbands. So they met in the market, as they usually did, and the first wife said, oh, you will not believe what he did yesterday. He is such a fool. I came into the house, the baby is screaming, he's trying to feed her hot soup. And he looks at me and says, she's very stubborn today. Her mouth is hot. Of course she's stubborn. Oh, the man. Later on in the afternoon, I looked out the window, and there he is walking down the road in front of our house, picking up stones, obviously admiring them, putting them in a satchel. I watch him. He goes into the garden, and he puts them in with the vegetables. I come out, I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, you won't believe our good fortune. Some truck must have gone down the road and dropped its load. Look at all these potatoes. And you heard the last one. You saw the last one. You saw him coming home from the market with 130 ducks. I sent him to the market to get a loaf of bread. And someone talked him into buying these marvelous ducks. Not a one of them has laid an egg. The other woman said, I commiserate with you. I understand totally, but my husband is worse. Much, much worse. Talking about children, I came up one morning and he's trying to put the baby's frock on upside down. Oh, the foolishness of this man. I left to visit my mother, who wasn't feeling well. I come back, and what is he doing? He took my best bonnet and put it in the chicken coop for the eggs to be laid by the hens. Well, they went on like this and on like this, and finally one of them said, you know, we should have a wager, you and I. Which one is the most foolish? And so they set this up. They said, Sunday. We'll go to church on Sunday, we'll present our cases, and we'll let the village decide who has the most foolish husband. Sounds good. So the first one goes home, and she gets her loom out and sets it in the middle of the living room and keeps watching out the window for him to come home from work. As soon as she sees him come through the gate, she sits down at that loom. She's got that loom spinning, click, 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 click. She's reaching in, and she's pulling out absolutely nothing and feeding it into the loom. He walks in, and she hardly even acknowledges him, just keeps doing it, putting it on the loom, and he stands there. He's watching him. Have you gone out of your mind, he says? You have nothing in your hands. And she said, well, that's how you treat the woman who is making you the most beautiful suit you have ever had. This is the finest linen available. So fine, you can hardly see it. And she keeps going. And he stands up. Oh, for me, he's a little vain. For me? Yes, husband, for you. Your dinner's on the table, go eat it. He goes and sits down, this dinner is made, click, 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 and spin, 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 and pull, 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 and she just stays there. When he's done eating, he takes his dishes over to put in the sink, but then he looks at her, he washes them. She keeps it up. Later on in the evening, she says, whoa, that is finally done. I've been at that all day long. And then she goes to the closet and pulls out the loom, wires it, threads it, and says, I'll do the rest in the morning. When he gets up in the morning to go to work, there she is, sitting at the loom, pushing the shuttle through, snapping it so the cords change, pushing it back, pushing it on. She is so busy. Have a good day, he says, and he's off. He comes home that night. She watches him when he's coming, and when he comes, she's at the table. Snip, 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 cut, 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 cut the fabric. Oh, what a wonderful one. I told them at work today, says he. I told them at work today what a wonderful wife I have, and they all are anxious to see my suit of clothes. She just laughed. Meanwhile, the other wife, she's no slouch. That same day of the wager, she's waiting at the door for her husband to come in. She opens the door. Oh, my husband. Oh, my husband. Oh, you poor man. Oh, come in, you poor man. You go right upstairs and get in bed. You look so... how long have you been feeling like this? And he looks at her. I had a little scratchy throat today. But no, go right upstairs. Go right upstairs. Get into bed. I'll bring food to you. Oh, why didn't you tell me sooner? She hustles him up. She goes into the kitchen. She's got the tray all ready. She's got bromides, and she's got salves, and she's got tinctures. She's got tea. She's got soup. Crackers. Takes it all upstairs. Are you going to be able to eat? Oh, husband, you haven't got your clothes off. You must get your sleeping gown on. Get into bed, you poor man. Helps him into bed. Puts that down. Are you going to be able to eat any of this? Here, let me help you with the soup. And he's laying there, trying to think, how do I feel? But she keeps it up. Are you in much pain? If you make it through the night, you might be all right. I've made arrangements for the children to go with our neighbor, their grandmother, and I'm going to sleep on the couch tonight. Oh, I hope you're there in the morning. He was awake all night. Just laying in bed, wondering, am I that bad? In the morning, she comes in. He says, I'm not feeling so good today. You haven't slept all night. She said, oh, husband, I know. It shows on your face. Oh, my goodness. Oh, if you'd only told me sooner. I didn't want to worry you, said she. So this kept up. She wouldn't let him go to work the next day. She didn't want him dead, but she's got to win this wager, right? So the day before church, he wants to get up and go in the garden. No, she says, you stay right. Oh, my gosh, I won't make it. And the next morning, he wakes up and he slept. He actually slept. He wakes up and she comes in and he says, I think I'll get up now. And he sits up. She says, no, you won't. You lay right back down. You died in the night. This is what death is like? At least you don't have any pain anymore. And he said, no, I don't have any pain anymore. So she called for a coffin maker to bring the coffin, and they brought it in, and she wrapped him in a beautiful blanket, one they had for their wedding and they never used, and they got him in the coffin, and she said, now, oh my darling, I love you so much. And they went to church, pushed the coffin into the church. All of the town is in there waiting, and there he is. Oh, he looks so beatific. Women are patting him on the forehead, touching his cheek, the men are slapping his hands, and they're saying nice things about him as they always do. And then the church goes quiet, not a sound. And he hears the slamming of the door, someone has come in, and then he hears the foot treads, he knows it's his best friend. And the best friend is saying to his wife, you were right, wife. They all are admiring this suit, which is underwear. They get up to the coffin, and one of the little kids starts laughing. And once a child starts laughing, everybody is pointing at this poor guy and laughing. And the one in the coffin's thinking, what is going on? So he opens his eyes and he peeks. And he sees his friend. He can't help himself. He sits up straight and he says, I'd be laughing at you too if I wasn't dead. And the church is silent again. Everybody looks at him. Well, they had a good laugh. They took the blanket off the dead man, put it on the naked man, and they spent the afternoon just having a good time in church with their friends. But I must tell you, the argument has gone on. The wives' children, their children's children, the argument continues. Who was the most foolish? Because the town just couldn't decide.
Thank you, Nancy Marie Fain, for starting us off with a lot of laughs. From Iceland. I've heard that same story said in Appalachia.
Oh, no.
Yes.
They were immigrants from Iceland.
Oh, right, yes. It's well known there's a large Icelandic immigrants, a number of Icelandic immigrants. Okay. Our next teller is Joe Doolittle, one of the producers of Word Plays. He will be telling a personal story called Quiet, which is going to be quite different, I imagine, from Nancy Marie's story. When I asked him the music question, he said, oh, the music that this story would be like is harp music. Joe Doolittle.
So, I did a little research. And you know, For Better For Worse is the comic strip in the Sunday Times Union and the Times Union. And I thought it would be good to move a comic strip message with my story. So I've done a lot of research, and here's the comic strip. The little kids are looking out the window and say, where are Grandma and Grandpa? Why aren't they here yet? Well, they aren't here yet because they got to go over to Uncle Phil's and drop off their luggage. Why aren't they staying here? We got a lot of room. Uncle Phil's got a lot of quiet. So the experience of young kids. And I tried to match that up neatly with a story, and I couldn't do it. But I thought the line was so good, I'd lead off with it. And I have two granddaughters who are now 16 and 20. But when they were younger, they were fountains of material for a storyteller. And particularly the firstborn. If anybody here is a firstborn or is a secondborn and has a firstborn sibling, you'll understand the dynamic of what makes for a kind of an assertive type A personality. And my granddaughter Ellie fits that bill. And my son was walking down the street in New Haven, Connecticut, and he sees this beautiful spinning piano in a piano store. It's used. It belonged to a Yale professor whose wife died, and he finally got to buy a grand piano, so he traded in his spin. So it had a good story to it. Ben bought it. And 3 days later, it gets delivered. And they put it in the living room, and Ben starts to kind of trickle the keys and says, Ellie, we can play some really neat stuff together on this piano. And she says, I don't want to play the piano. She's 7. I don't want to play the piano. But you like music? Yes. Would you like to play some other instrument? Yes. I'd like to play the harp. 8-year-old, 7-year-old kid playing the harp. Well, they found a teacher who would engage with her. They got a little Irish harp, and Ellie began to play. Now, she had to kind of practice because she'd chosen this instrument. It wasn't like her father had brought her home a harp. So she did, and she got somewhat proficient. My mother passes away. She's 105 years old. And it's in the middle of the winter. The cemetery is up in New Hampshire. We can't actually have a memorial service graveside until May. So I'm planning some of that service on the phone with my son. And Ellie gets on the phone. She says, Papa, I want to play my harp at Big Bama's service. Put your father on. It's okay, Bob. She'll do fine. Don't worry about it. So it's a beautiful May Saturday. It's a little cemetery up in the foothills of the White Mountains, and there we all are. And I see my son coming through with the harp, and Ellie coming through with her music stand and her stool, and her mother with more music, and her little sister. And we're all standing around, and the casket is here, and this big, huge boulder that my grandfather had put there with the name Doolittle on it, so everybody would know what the plot is. And she just comes up and she points where she wants her stool to go. And that's where the stool goes, and that's where the harp goes. And then she comes around, and she gets her music, and she puts that together. And then she looks around, and she comes over, and she says, Papa, I'm ready when you are. So I started the service. And I said that Ellie was going to play and lead us into things. And I nodded to her. And Ellie, at 8, started to play Bach on her little harp. I was surprised. She did it beautifully. It wasn't very long, and she stopped very poised, and she did another little classical number, and everybody was, and one of my cousins says, Ellie, that was beautiful. Do you know anything else? She looks around. She, so help me, winked at me and started to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Laughter again. Here we were to celebrate my mother, gracious in her old age, at 105, and we were led into the memories by the laughter from an 8-year-old playing a harp. Now, when I said that my grandkids were kind of fountains of material, you had no idea what I might mean. But I hope things are running in your own memories of things that you've done either as a grandchild or as a parent, because the stories we share are the stories that make us knit together. And whether that's quiet or not, I'm not sure. I'll leave the quiet to the cartoon in the newspaper.
Thank you, Joe. That did remind me of some things our son said when he was younger. And he even at age 36, he still likes to push my buttons. I think he looks at me as one large button. Anyway, thank you. Our next teller is Beverly Schwartz. She's going to tell us a Yiddish folktale from Eastern Europe called A Big Quiet House. And when I asked her the musical question, she said, Old MacDonald had a farm. Beth.
Once upon a time, there was a man. He was a very poor, unfortunate man. And he lived in a hut. And in the hut, he lived with his mother, his wife, and 6 children. It was a noisy hut. The nights were long, and the days were cold. It was a hard life. He argued with his wife all the time, and his children quarreled and cried. One morning, he woke up. He couldn't stand the noise and the yelling and the crying and arguing. And he went and he ran to the rabbi. Holy Rabbi, help me, help me. Things are just getting worse and worse. I live in a little hut, 1 room, with my mother, my wife, my 6 children. The 6 kids keep getting bigger, and the house keeps getting smaller. The rabbi listened, and he stroked his long gray beard, and said, would you have a chicken or 2 handy? Well, yeah, I have some chickens, and I have a goose, and I even have the best crowing rooster you'd ever had. Well, I want you to take them, my man, and put them in your hut to live with you. He was a little surprised that the rabbi had said to put these animals in his hut. But he went home, and he put the chicken, which was going cluck, 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 cluck. Work with me, people. Cluck, 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 cluck. And the goose went honk, 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 honk. Honk, 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 honk. And the rooster went, and here's our little rooster, cock-a-doodle-doo! Cock-a-doodle-doo! Well, after a few weeks, the poor man couldn't stand it any longer. And he ran right back to the rabbi. Rabbi, help me! Right now, besides my 6 kids, which are arguing and noisy, my wife, which we are having still arguments, we have clucking from the chickens. Cluck, 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 cluck. We have honking from the goose. Honk, 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 honk. And we have this big crow. Cock-a-doodle-doo. And there's feathers in my soup. The rabbi stroked his beard again, and thought, would you have a goat? Oh, I have a goat, but it doesn't worth much. It's a very old goat. Ah, said the rabbi, I want you to go and take that goat and bring it into the hut and live with you. Was this rabbi crazy, thought the man, and this the fortunate man? Ah, are you sure? Do it immediately. And so the man trudged home and took the goat and brought it into the hut. Now, besides the chickens going cluck, 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 and besides the goose going honk, 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 and the famous rooster going, and there was still feathers in the soup, now the goat was taking its horns and butting everyone in the hut. He woke up a few weeks later and said to himself, I can't take this. It's a nightmare what's happening in this hut. The hut is getting smaller and the kids are getting bigger and the noise is overwhelming, and not only did this noise get overwhelming, but the smell did too. So he went back to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, the world is coming to an end in my little hut. You have to help me. It's gotten worse and worse. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, would you have a cow? Yes, I have a cow. Well, I want you to take that cow and, don't tell me, put it in the hut. Yes, put the cow into the hut. Moo. Moo. And he gets home, he looks down on the ground and he drags the cow into the hut. Now, a few weeks later, if he could have said a nervous breakdown he did. What sits on the bottom of the ocean and quivers, he thought? A nervous wreck. That's what he had become. But now, the cow decided it didn't like the chickens or anybody else, because everyone was quarreling, including the chickens at that point. The goat was ramming everyone all over, and the cow tramped all over everyone. The house, the one-room hut, was unrecognizable. He finally ran to the rabbi again. Rabbi, that's it. The world has ended in my hut. What do I do? And the rabbi pulled his beard down and said, this is what I want you to do. You go back home now and take the chickens that go cluck, 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 cluck. Take the goose that goes honk, 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 honk. Take the rooster that goes cock-a-doodle-doo. Tell the bat, which goes back out the door, and take the cow and move it back to the shed. Take all the animals out. Oh, I will. And he ran right away. He didn't want to hear any other ideas that the rabbi might have had. And he ran back, and he took all the animals and put it back into the shed where they virtually all were. And that night, the whole family slept peacefully. There was no noise. There was no quarreling. No arguments. And he said to the rabbi, when he went and he told him what had happened, he said, it was so peaceful. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you all for your audience participation. It was very moving. Should I duck? Our last teller in the first half is Sandy Schumann, who will be telling an historical story called If You Believed in Me. And the answer to the musical question from Sandy is a Broadway show tune.
Oh.
Oops.
Ben Hecht Anybody recognize that name? Okay, well, one couple of people. Ben Hecht won the Oscar, the Academy Award, for Best Original Story for his movie Underworld in 1927. It was the first gangster movie. It was just a couple of years later, 1929, when his Broadway show debuted, The Front Page. Huge success. Huge success. To give you an illustration of just how successful that show was, it has been revived on Broadway 4 times, as recently as just a few years ago. It has been adapted for film 4 times. It has been produced on television 4 times and adapted as a radio play 3 times. I guess the radio people didn't get the memo. That was 1929, a pair of successes rare to any writer. And then 1932, his film Scarface, if Underworld was the first gangster movie, Scarface set the standard for that genre. Scarface, very popular in spite of the fact that it was censored because it glorified violence. That was in April of 1932. In December of 1932, his new play was to open on Broadway. His new play entitled The Great Magoo. Expectations were through the roof. Ben Hecht's new play, The Great Magoo. I want to tell you a little bit about the storyline. The whole story takes place on Coney Island in a carnival. The main characters, Nicky and Julie, both work in the carnival. Julie is an aspiring singer and dancer. She dances the dance of the 7 veils. I can't help but wonder what happens to those 7 veils. Nicky, on the other hand, has grown up in the carnival. Abandoned by his parents, he's raised by others in this carnival world. And now, as a young man, he's a barker. He's the one who stands in front of the tent or the trailer, calling people in to see the bearded lady, the rubber-skinned man, the 2-headed snake, the wonders of the universe. And he knows that the people he is calling in to spend their quarters are being fleeced. He knows that this is all fakery, they're phonies, and that's the life that he has lived. He knows that life is just a charade, that people are dishonest, they're unreliable, they break promises. Even when they say, I love you, they don't mean it. He is cynical, embittered, alcoholic. He has given up on love. He has given up on life. And then he meets Julie. And amazingly, he turns around and once again he has hope. He can see a future. And Julie loves him. And they are going to start a new life together as a song and dance team. They are going to be big on Broadway. And how are they going to do it? Julie has saved up $75. And Nicky is going to take that $75 and buy them a song. He's going to go to Tin Pan Alley and buy the best song he can for $75, and they are going to perform that song, and that's going to be their on-ramp to Broadway fame. Julie gives him the $75, and what he doesn't gamble away, he drinks. And so he can't buy any song, but he can't tell Julie this. He's trying to build a lifetime relationship with her. And even though everybody at the carnival knows that he's a faker and a phony, just like everything else, he has hope for his relationship with Julie. And so he writes a song because he couldn't buy one. Now, when the authors of this play, this is Ben Hecht and his co-writer, Gene Fowler, when they got to that point in the story, they realized they needed a song. So, you know, they're writers, they write a song. And they show the script to the producer. The producer of this play, The Great Magoo, is none other than the famous Broadway producer, Billy Rose, himself a lyricist. Billy Rose takes a look at the song that they wrote, and he says, "You guys are not songwriters, and this is not a song. I'll get you a song." And so he hires two up-and-coming, well, they're beyond up-and-coming, they're becoming established songwriters. They've had some hits. Harold Arlen is writing songs for the Cotton Club in 1932, when this play is about to be debuted. In 1932, that's the year he wrote Stormy Weather. Joe's got a story about stormy weather, but you have to wear a raincoat. And Yip Harburg, as a lyricist, 1932 was the year that he wrote Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, the anthem of the Great Depression. So Billy Rose hires these two guys. He says, "I need a song." Well, they're busy. They've got other projects, but you don't turn down Billy Rose. And now they're confronted with a problem. They've got this sad, cynical, embittered character who's going to write and sing a love song to this aspiring singer-dancer who's not going to make it. But she doesn't know that yet. How are they going to write a love song? And they realize that the key ingredient here is having faith in the other person. And so they write a song which they entitle, "If You Believed in Me." Yes, there's all this fakery. Yes, there's this phoniness. But everything would be okay if you believed in me. That was the idea for the song. The Great Magoo, Ben Hecht's Broadway play, 1932, set Broadway records. In only 8 days, 11 performances, that's including matinees, it closed. Now, some people said that the reason it didn't succeed was because the play running in the theater next door, a musical starring Ethel Merman called Take a Chance, it was such a huge success. The theater goers just walked right past the Great Magoo and headed to the theater to see Take a Chance. Take a Chance was so successful, they rushed it to Hollywood, made it into a movie. They dropped most of the songs from the original show, but they imported that song from the Great Magoo, "If You Believed in Me." Well, the movie didn't do so well, but the song became the theme for the movie. It was recorded by the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, and since then, it's been recorded by everybody from Paul Whiteman to Paul McCartney, from Nat King Cole to Natalie Cole, from Count Basie to Barbara Streisand. Quite a popular tune. 1947, Tennessee Williams wrote a streetcar named Desire. And there's Blanche, the Southern belle, who pretends to be wealthy, pretends to be popular, but in fact has lost the family fortune and been fired from her job. But she wants to be respected. She wants to be popular. And in the course of that play, she sings little snippets of that same song, If You Believed in Me, because she wants the world. In spite of all of her flaws and losses, she wants the world to believe in her. The song shows up again in a Japanese novel, a science fiction novel, where there's a fake world with 2 moons. And this couple of kids who knew each other as children and connected strongly, but then were separated, and for decades they're looking for each other, and they finally find each other in this fake world. And once reunited, they're able to return. This song is quoted at the beginning of every chapter, a different little segment of the song. And then, this is your homework assignment tonight, folks. Because, especially if you have Netflix, find Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Doesn't matter if you never heard of this before. Season 7, Episode 10. The episode bears the name of this song. And it's all about believing in somebody, even though most people don't. I'd like to tell you the details of that series, but since you can watch it for homework, we'll pass for now. Now, when you find it there, you'll see the episode title doesn't have the name, If You Believed in Me. That's because when they brought the song into the movie, Take a Chance, they changed the title. So you have to know the name of the song in order to find the right episode. And maybe you've figured out what song it is at this point. If you haven't, maybe you'll recall a 1973 film that has the same title as the title of this song. It's one where Tatum O'Neal won an Oscar as Best Supporting Actress, the youngest person ever to receive an Academy Award. And if you still haven't figured it out, the song goes like this. Say it's only a paper moon sailing over a cardboard sea. Wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Say it's only a canvas sky hanging over a muslin tree. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Without your love, it's a honky-tonk parade. Without your love, it's a melody played in a penny arcade. It's a Barnum and Bailey world, just as phony as it can be. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. If you believed in me. It's Only a Paper Moon, Yip Harburg and Harold Arlen, 1932. You might know about Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg. They wrote the song of the century. The one song out of all the songs of the 20th century that made the list #1. That's the song Over the Rainbow, but for better or for worse, that's another story.
Rock and roll. Heavy on the backbeat. In the Orkney Islands. Who knew? Claire Nolan.
I learned this story from a very young storyteller, and she reminded me so much of my niece. It was almost eerie. She had the same smile, the same long, straight hair, the same presence. I was just struck by her, this young woman, and the story was so delightful that I borrowed it from her, and I took the story from the Orkney Islands, and I have moved it here to Albany. Oh, we're in Schenectady. I moved it not here to Albany County, but to Albany County, to one of my favorite places in all the world, which is Thatcher Park and Thompson's Lake. And if you have not been there lately, it's still there, and it's still beautiful, and it's still full of rocks. I promise you. In fact, there are so many rocks there, it amazes me. I was telling Jerry this before the show began. It amazes me that a few hundred years ago, the Helderbergs were full of farmers. Thousands of farmers who would grow crops, beautiful, beautiful crops, and raise animals, healthy, strong animals, and sell all of that delicious food in Albany. And they brought it down the mountain. They had two choices to get that food down the mountain. They could take a long road that wound around and took a good part of a good day. Or they could take an hour or two and go straight down the ledge. If they chose the second way to get their food down the mountain, they often lost a lot of their produce, some animals, and even human life. So it was a hard life there, up there in the Helderbergs, and it still amazes me how many people farmed that land. Nancy knows what I'm talking about. She lived there. She had the luck, the fabulous luck to live in a gorgeous house there up in those Helderberg Mountains. And she knows that when she dug in her garden, every spring, she found not one, not two, not three, but thousands of rocks of all sizes and shapes. And she had to take them out of her garden if she wanted anything to grow. And that's how it was with the farmer in my story. He was not a lonely man. He was very happy to be alone. He lived alone, and he liked it like that. He lived alone on his small farm in his little cottage. His barn, which a generation or two before had been a beautiful red barn, as you see up there in the Helderbergs, it had long since collapsed and fallen in on itself. But that didn't matter. He still found places to store the hay and the straw that was the bedding and the fodder for his animals. And the animals could stay in a small part of the barn as well. And for himself, he had a little cottage. It's all he needed, and his land. And each spring, he would dig, he would plow, and he would throw out those rocks. Year after year, it didn't matter how many years he'd been plowing that land, the rocks were still there. Well, one day, as he was digging and plowing and throwing the rocks out, he found the strangest rock he had ever seen. Now, if you've ever been up in the Helderbergs, you know that they are famous for fossils. And maybe you've been lucky enough to find a fossil or two up there. This was not a fossil. He didn't know a lot about these rocks that he threw out of his garden, but he knew he'd never seen anything like this one before. It had a head. I can safely say it had a head and a body, almost like a little snowman. It had little legs. They were like stone pillars, these tiny little legs on this rock. It had two bright blue stars where eyes might be on that rock that seemed to be a head. And it seemed to look at him. And this old farmer who had lived alone for so long picked up this little thing and admired it and kind of liked it. And he brought it into his cabin and he set it on the table. And the two, this rock thing and the farmer, stared at each other. And then there was a loud banging on the door. And the two looked at each other in surprise, not knowing what to do, and the farmer collected himself. No one had ever knocked on his door in his memory, but he went to the door, and he opened it. And there on the other side of the door was the double of his little rock thing. Only this one was much, 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 much bigger. Its head was a boulder. Its body was the size of 6 boulders. It was huge. And those little pillars that the little one had, these were massive stone pillars that held this monster, this rock monster up. And there were those 2 blue sapphire eyes staring at him. And this monster, this rock monster mama said to the farmer, "Give me back my baby!" The farmer was taken aback and had spoken to him, but this farmer, although he lived alone in those mountains, he knew the stories, and he knew what to say to this rock monster mama. "You can have your baby if you promise to do 3 tasks for me." And the rock monster, she also knew the stories, and she agreed. What's the first task, she wanted to know. "Your first task is to clear my field of every single rock." She was a rock monster. She had that field cleared in an instant. Every single rock piled neatly all around. She even made a lovely little wall on the north side of the farm. "Give me back my baby," she said again. But oh no, that was only 1 task. "You have 3 more to go," said the farmer. "Your second task, I want you to rebuild my barn." Well, this task was going to be a little more difficult because she was not a monster of wood and beam. No, she was a monster of the earth. But she tried her best. She took those rocks that she had cleared from the field and she shored up the foundation of that barn. And she found some old timber from the barn that had fallen down and she rebuilt the barn. It took her a little longer, but it was a good-looking barn when she was done. And she went back to that farmer's door and she knocked on it again and she said, "Give me back my baby!" Well, this farmer had had some time to think about it, about the third task. He thought of something that would be impossible for her to do. And he said, "This is your third task. You must make a roof for my barn. You must thatch my barn with a feather from every single mother bird in the mountains, in the forest, and in the water." And he closed the door. She went out into that field that she had completely cleared of all those rocks, and she sat in that field, and she wept, and she howled, and she cried, and she wailed as only a mother who has lost her child can cry. How was she going to get feathers? She was a monster of the earth, not a monster of the air. She cried and wept and wailed on for hours, it seemed. And then she felt something pass her face lightly, and she opened those blue sapphire eyes and held out her hand, and there was a feather, the blue feather of a mother blue jay. And she looked around her, and it was raining feathers. There were the brown feathers of the mother cardinal, white feathers from the chickadee. There were feathers from the hummingbird. Even the tiniest little hummingbird had sent a feather to her. The eagle had come off her ledge and had flown over her and dropped one of her magnificent feathers. And even the owl woke up to bring a feather to this mother of the earth. All the birds, the ducks and the geese. Even a few chickens managed to bring some feathers by. And soon, all around her, there were piles and piles of these feathers, gifts from all of the mother birds to this grieving mother. And she took those feathers and she thatched the roof of that barn. and it was beautiful. All of the colors that you can imagine, from every bird that you can imagine, from the mountain and the forest and the water. When she was satisfied, she went to the door of that cabin and she knocked long and hard on that door until finally the farmer opened the door and he looked out beyond her and saw his barn so beautifully thatched. He stood there agape. She grabbed her baby and she went far into the mountains, melted into the ledges. She's never been seen since. But if you take a trip up to those Helderberg Mountains, you might find that barn beautifully thatched with the feathers from all the mother birds.
Thank you, Claire Nolan. I just wanted to see that. It was a lot of fun. Oh. Now, Siri Allison is going to tell us a modern retelling of a folktale called Bastianello. And the musical answer is A Wedding March.
Ooh.
For better or for worse. Siri Allison.
It was a lovely sunny Saturday afternoon in May, first start. And Rosemarie Costello and Walter Shermer had just gotten married. They had met there at the State University in town, there where they both worked. She was in the personnel department, and he was a researcher in a government chemistry lab that was associated with the university science department. And I know somebody who's in a science government lab connected with the university. They do common research. The wedding ceremony had gone off without a hitch, and now the wedding reception was in full swing in Rosemarie's parents' backyard. There were little white lights in the trees, and there was a tent for all the food that her enthusiastic Italian-American family had made, and there was a little band, and people were dancing. And one of the uncles had flown in from New York City's Little Italy 200 little Italian ices, those individual little Italian ices. And the first batch of these was set out in a big bowl of ice next to the wedding cake, and the rest were stashed on trays in the basement freezer. Well, Rosemarie had just noticed that the first batch was almost gone, so she headed to the basement to get some more. As she crossed the yard, she's thinking, oh, she's so lucky to have found Walter. He's so calm, so steady, so unlike her impetuous, emotional Italian family, and he makes such good decisions. He weighs the pros and the cons, and when he finally comes to a decision, he says, yes, that makes sense. They were going to be so happy. They were going to buy this little house, somewhere near her parents and have children, and she had decided long ago that the first boy would be named Bastianello, because, believe it or not, both of her grandfathers, maternal and paternal, had been named Bastianello. Someday soon, he would be running around this very backyard, maybe coming in this kitchen door with her. She'd say, now, don't slam the door, Bastianello. He was going to be so cute. So here she was at the basement door. She gathered up the skirts of her wedding dress, and she went down the steps to the freezer, took out the tray, closed the door, got back to the steps. Now, she takes her wedding dress skirt in one hand, she's balancing the tray with the other, she starts up the steps. This wasn't so easy. One step, two steps, all of a sudden she's losing her balance, falling backwards, to fall kerplop, unhurt, but quite surprised, on the basement floor. She's sitting there and well, you know how weddings are. She hadn't eaten much or slept much in the last few days. This momentousness, of the ceremony, a glass of champagne on an empty stomach, and suddenly this little Bastianello coming in the kitchen door becomes Bastianello running down the stairs, and maybe someday he would do that and fall as she had and break his arm or something worse. Maybe he would die. And suddenly Rosemarie was there in a fright of tears, just crying her eyes out. Well, at that moment, her mother appears on the top step. Oh, darling, what's wrong? So Rosemary tells her about Bastianello and how he might come down the steps and how he might die. And, well, being mother of the bride is also kind of stressful. So this tired mother of the bride, she sat down on the top step and she, too, began to cry. After a while, here comes the father looking for them. He asks what's wrong. He hears what it is. He goes down the stairs, puts his arm around this little buddy of his that he had just given away in marriage, and he too starts to cry. Well, out in the yard now, Walter is sipping champagne on an empty stomach. He starts to wondering, I haven't seen Aunt Rosemary in a while. He goes looking for her. He comes in the house, he hears this odd noise. He follows the noise to see his new mother-in-law sitting there on the top step, bawling. Looking down, there's his new father-in-law, weeping. And there's Rosemary herself, sitting on the floor, her wedding dress bunched around her, these pastel puddles of melting Italian ice everywhere, and on her mascara streaming down her face. What's wrong? They tell him. Now this sweet, sensible Walter suddenly sees his whole life flash in front of his eyes. Here he's going to be bound tight to this emotional fucking bronco of a family. He's not going to be able to make a logical decision, to take a straightforward step. Ever. In his life. He's going to be stuck to this. And he hears himself say, I see now I don't belong in this family. I'm leaving. But I'll be back if in 3 days' time I can find 3 people as not sensible, as nonsensical as you all are. And he turns on his heel and he calls a cab and he picks up his honeymoon going away bag and he walks down the block to meet the cab. Well, when the cabbie says, where to? He doesn't know. Oh yes, he does. To the lab. To some sensible, reasonable formulas and numbers. So he gets in the cab and off they go. Well, 15 easy minutes later, they're getting close to the university, but the traffic is getting really bad. Must be a ball game. A ball game. So about a block away, the traffic is so slow, he said, you know, just let me out here, I'll walk. Fine, says cabbie, $40. Oh, but then he realizes Walter does it, he's still got on his tux. So he says, oh, never mind, take me the rest of the block. And he takes off his tie and his tux jacket and he puts on a sweater. Here we are, says the cabbie, $50. $50? A block ago it was 40. That's right, that was zone 4, this is zone 5, $50. Walter pays, gets out, walks into the lab, realizes he's forgot his government ID. He says to the guard, Gilly, I forgot my ID, but I'll just sign in as a visitor. Oh no, you know that visitors have to be pre-approved and have sponsors. You can't sign in as a visitor on the spur of the moment. Gilly, you know me. Yeah, I know you, but the computer doesn't know you. It has to scan your ID. At this moment, a group of chattering students walks right by the desk on the way to the elevator. Well, what about them? Oh, they're students. They're going to the school floor, the 4th floor. They don't have to sign in. I'm telling you, all these examples are true. When the government laughs at the person I know, the students just walk right in. Well, pretend I'm a student, he says. At that moment, ding, the elevator dings. The door opens, the students file in. Dr. Clark, the leader, the boss of the lab, walks out. He takes in the situation. Walter, are you giving Gilly trouble? I'll have to raise your salary if you don't watch out. And he goes on out. Walter's face falls, and Gilly says, what's wrong? He said he'd raise your salary. I'm on soft money. My salary has to be covered by my grants. I can't get any more grants now. If he raises my salary, I'm out. Oh, I think I need a candy bar. Walter goes down the hall to where the vending machines are. Oh, no more Almond Joys. Wait a minute. It's not that the Almond Joys are out. The row where they're supposed to be is full of Hershey bars. There are no Almond Joys. There are 2 rows of Hershey bars. He calls down the hall, Gilly, what happened to the Almond Joys? They're my favorite. Oh yeah, they're everybody's favorite. So everybody kept taking them instead of the others, and the guy couldn't keep them stocked same as the rest, so he just quit having them. Walter sat down on the bench. That just didn't make any sense. Not having the favorite candy bar because it was the favorite. Come to think of it, there were a lot of things that didn't make sense. Taxi zones and IDs with students walking by and raising your salary to fire you, and worst of all, he himself had left the woman that he loved sitting on her basement floor, a soggy mess. Went out, hailed a cab, all the way back he's planning his apology, thinking about the glorious reunion they're going to have. The cab dropped him off at the driveway, and there's Rosemarie putting her suitcase in the trunk. He walks up about to begin his apology, and she says, "Oh, you're back. Well, I don't know if I belong in a family with someone as sensible as you. I'm leaving, and I'll be back in 3 days' time, if during that time I can find someone as cold fish logical as you." And she slammed the trunk, and she got in the car and drove away. She, too, was back in less than an hour. And this time it was a glorious, glorious reunion. And this is a folk tale, but it's close enough to a fairy tale that I can tell you that Rosemarie and Walter lived happily ever after.
Siri, what a wonderful retelling of...
But every example I gave is true. My father-in-law knew somebody who stocked those vending machines, and he took out the almond joys, and too many people liked them.
I guess it made sense to him. Anyways, to end our wonderful afternoon of stories is Marty Gillard telling a personal story. Now, I remember, Marty, when you had your debut of your double CD, and you introduced me to this woman called Betsy, and you very sweetly said, "We're related by marriage." And I thought, oh, I remember being at one of my sister's weddings, and there was, the bride's family was here and the groom's family was there, and I ended up talking to some woman. We realized we were both the bride's sister-in-law, but from the two different directions. So I figured, oh, Betsy was, that kind of situation. Gotcha. But actually, Betsy is the woman in this story that's called Befriending My New Husband's First Wife. That's how they were related by marriage. I don't think
You did good.
I gave away anything there.
It's not a funny story, but it is a very sweet story in my heart.
Oh, and
wait to get to the end, where...
The music. Yes, okay, yes.
You say it.
Playmate, come out and play with me, and we'll be jolly friends forevermore.
Good. Well, I grew up in a house where two Irish-American people who had known each other their whole lives were my parents. And they were very romantic. When I was a very little girl and my dad came home from school, he was a school administrator, he had his suitcase, he would put his suitcase down on the floor and he would say, "Come on, Edie, dance with me." And she'd dance with him around the kitchen. And I just loved watching them dance. And eventually she would say, "Billy, I've got to get dinner ready. Find yourself another girl." And there I was. Okay, I'll dance. And I just loved romance. At 10 years old, they took me with all my brothers and sisters. I think there were only 5 at that point, but one on the way eventually. And we went to the Oswego movie theater to see Marion the librarian falling in love with
Harold Hill.
Harold Hill, the music
Music
man. And that was like romance. I've got to have romance in my life. And I just was this girl who found ways to kind of have romance, whether it was holding hands on a Ferris wheel or a first peck of a kiss, and then another brother going, no, I'll show you how to give her a kiss, and knocking my socks off at about age 12. But at age 13, my romantic and wonderful dad left the planet in a car accident late at night. And the next morning, my mother said, I'm giving you all a job to do. And she started with my oldest brother, and then my next brother, and then I heard, and you're going to be valedictorian of 8th grade, Marnie, and I want to make sure we're enough of these boys all hanging around. You get your homework done. And I knew that my life had changed. And we had a funeral, we cried a little bit, but then we were going on, because that's part of being Irish too, that stoic thing of we're gonna go on despite the problem. And I'm going to jump ahead to college. I wasn't finding a lot of romance in my high school years because I was carrying so much grief, and we were all just pushing it down. And then when I got to college, I had a nice boyfriend for a little while, but he was Jewish, and I was Catholic. And pretty soon it was going to be clear that there was no way his mother was going to approve of me. And I got that. But he had a fraternity brother, and I knew that fraternity brother. I knew of him. And he was somebody who loved to sweep in when a girl got broken up with and teach her how to be romantic, you know, yeah. And I foolishly fell for that. For a little while, I held up my guard, and it was like, you know, I'm Catholic, and I'm not going to be doing anything that, you know, you want to do until, you know, we get married or something like that. And he said, so sincerely, you really want to know about your body. You want to know about it and how it works and what you love about it when you are, you know, married. You don't want to wait till the day you get married to start thinking about that. And I knew it was a line, but I was so hungry for romance at that point that I stayed that summer in Albany, and I got a summer job far away from my mother. And I learned some things about romance. But come September, I knew that thing that I'd remembered from way back when, you know, he first started sort of pulling me in. This guy picks up other girls. He picks up other girls. And sure enough, one September night when I was coming back from my job, I still had my summer job at a restaurant over by Stuyvesant Plaza, and he didn't pick me up. He didn't pick me up, and it was a dark walk from there to the campus. And I went to his fraternity room, and he's eating pizza and watching TV with a bunch of guys, and I said, I thought you were going to pick me up. You always pick me up. And he said, come on to my room, I want to talk to you about something. He said, I make it, you know, a delight every fall when there's a lot of new people that come to the campus, you know, to make some new friends. And you would want to do that too. Wouldn't you want to do that? We could kind of, you know, sleep around with all different kinds of people. And I just froze. I just froze. Oh, my mother, I could hear her in the back of my head. Like, you'll learn. And I learned. I was heartbroken. And I just decided to put that old mind that my mother had taught me how to put on getting good marks. I went back to getting good marks. And I got good marks, and I did student teaching, and the next thing you know, I was graduating. And I got a wonderful job in Niskayuna. I was so excited. I was so proud of it. And when I was teaching that first year, it was just so much fun. I felt independent, and I was standing on my own 2 feet, and I was making money, a lot of money. I even bought a brand new car, a brand new shiny car with my own money. It was so exciting. And didn't somebody show up at my door that was the old boyfriend? And he said, wow, you're teaching now and you're making money. Wow, it's so great. It's so good to see you again. You know, I really miss you. I know, you know, playing around is fun and everything, but really, really, I miss you. And he took out a diamond ring and he put it in front of me and said, will you marry me? And my heart was like stone. I'd never heard of any girl not saying yes to a diamond ring. I'd seen it on TV 1,000 times and in fairy tales or whatever. Can you say no? How do you say no? I knew I didn't feel any more romance. But there was still all that big grief inside me, and it was kind of locked up. And I foolishly said, okay, I guess. Yeah, okay, I guess. Yeah, quite a surprise to see you again in a diamond ring. But I sort of froze, and I just didn't know how to say no. And so pretty soon, we were having a wedding. My mother planned all of it, and he planned the honeymoon. And the thing I remember most about my wedding day was my husband was pretty drunk at the end of the evening, and I hadn't been drinking at all that day. And we went to Oswego, just 10 miles away, to kind of, you know, have a first night. And then I woke up at 7 in the morning, and he was sound asleep, so I went to church. And I just went to this church because I knew my cousins went there. I didn't see them, but I sat in church, and I kind of wished I could just go home and go to church with my mother 10 miles back. But I knew she wouldn't like that if I said, I really just want to come home and go to church. So I've chosen to be married. I've gotten married, and I just sat in church and cried. I cried, and I tried to be quiet about it. But if you've ever been in church and wanted to cry, it's not easy. It's not easy to be quiet. So a lady finally at the end of church said, what is it, dear? What's troubling you? I got married yesterday to someone I shouldn't have gotten married to. But I did. And her eyes were wide, and okay, well, gosh, good luck. Good luck on that one. There are couple of other funny little parts where we went all this way to Bar Harbor, Maine. I was like, who picked this honeymoon? Oh, yeah. He did. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And we went all the way to Bar Harbor, and it was such a long drive. And on the very first day that we went in the ocean, it's freezing, you know, if you've ever been to Bar Harbor. It doesn't matter if it's July. He pulled his back out, and for like the rest of the week, he couldn't do anything. So I went down, and I ate lobsters like Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were, or whatever. No, not The Way We Were, but you know the movie with Barbra Streisand. She goes, can you eat three lobsters in a row? Put another one on. And that was sort of the best part of my honeymoon.
Oh, wow.
And then we came home, and we were married, and we had picked out an apartment, and you know, it was an okay kind of first year. But the second year, had a new classroom that was 8th graders, not 6th graders, that I think I had to tuck under my arm if they were crying and couldn't open their locker. They were like, oh, we're going to get this one, we're going to eat her up. And there was some lack of confidence in me that kind of was growing and growing as the year went by. And I didn't ever really feel like being intimate with this guy who had married me with a diamond ring. And I said, you know, I think maybe we could get some counseling or something like that to see if we could see if we could get closer. And my husband said, oh, you know, my dad says nobody really has good sex after you get married. Don't worry about it. And I was kind of like, wait, no, I need romance. Where's my romance gone? And I got through that year, and I got through the next. I got through 5 years, actually. And then I said, couldn't we have a child? Could we have a child? Not that I was going to have romance with my child, but I'd have somebody in my house that I felt like I really loved. I was doing my best, you know. I don't know, whatever movies were in my head about women who stay the course. But once I had the little boy, and we did do some counseling, my husband was really, really changing. He had mostly worked in the counseling on how hard his dad had been on him, how critical his dad had been on him. And I mostly worked on how much I missed my dad and feeling my grief and, you know, coughing up all that grief. And we didn't really exactly work on, you know, getting together as a couple too much. I knew that there was a really bad moment when we were driving home one night, and he said, I can't do this counseling anymore. Like, I have a big job, and I have to put all my attention into the job. And I said, that's okay. I'm going to keep going to the counseling because I'm learning a lot about myself. And it's, you know, it feels good. I'm feeling better about myself, and I think we're going to be okay. And he goes, oh, no, you're not. No, you're not going to that by yourself. I see how you flirt with those guys. I see that, you know, they like you. Everybody thinks you're so cute and everything. And he said something really rotten, but I'm not going to say it out loud. You so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, I think I have to work on ending this marriage. I have to do something about it. You know, he wasn't abusive exactly, but it was like, this is not the life I want. And I know I'm Catholic and I shouldn't get divorced and I should stick it out and all that, but I gotta get out of this. And after I had my son and we were doing fine, but I could see also that this sort of criticism thing that he had felt from his dad, he was going to now kind of dump on his new young son, who was, you know, wonderful and beautiful, and maybe dump on me some, you know, just, you know, how parenting things can get stuck in you and then you become that. And at the school I worked at, I met someone who was working side by side with me. We had sort of shared a team of kids. And we just started flirting a little bit. And it was fun. It was just fun. It was just flirting. But then there was a day when we were all sitting at a bar on a Friday afternoon, and something changed. Something turned the corner. And I went and sat in his car with him, and we had a little romance. And it was really nice. I knew it wasn't something I should be doing. He was married. He was 12 years older than me, and he had teenage kids. And while I felt like I'm ready to break up my marriage, and I can see that it can work for me and my son, but I shouldn't be messing with somebody else's marriage, but I was. And time went on, and pretty soon he and his wife separated. Well, he separated. He went and got himself an apartment, and I had myself already now, at that point, in an apartment by myself, and my husband and I had, figured out how to do child sharing, sharing a child, co-parenting kind of thing. And that was actually going pretty well. And he was having lots of girlfriends and a couple of different new wives. So I wasn't worried about the dad. And the little boy was doing fine. But his dad wanted him to go to Albany Academy for Boys at preschool. And it was like a long ride home. So I didn't really love that, especially once they started putting the stripes down his pants. Oh my gosh, they're going to turn him into a little soldier. We pulled him back out and we got him into a new school at Bethlehem, which is where his dad lived at that point. And he said, Mommy, don't forget to pick me up at the bus tonight. When I come home to Schenectady, you've got to be there. We had this thing. Don't forget, this is your night. I'm staying at your house, and you're going to, be there to pick me up at the bus. I said, yeah. Actually, tonight I have to get somebody to meet you at the bus. And I talked to my friend who had moved into his own apartment, and I said, can you come over and meet Brian? Because they'd kind of met each other and stuff. Can you meet Brian and pick him up at the bus? Because I have a meeting that's going to go till like 5 o'clock. And he said, no, I won't do that. I'll get Susie, my daughter, my teenage daughter. She's great with kids. She'll come over and sit with Brian or play with them. They'll be great. And I went, okay, you think that'll be okay with Susie? She says, she's mad at me. My kids are all a little mad at me. But, it's going to work. So I said, oh, okay. I don't want it to be a hard thing for her. He said, life. Here we are in our life that we've chosen. And so I went to my meeting, and then I'm coming down the street on Glenwood Boulevard. I will always remember this moment. And I pull up on the side of the street, and I look up to my apartment, and on the front steps on this lovely spring day, there's my little boy, there's the teenager Susie, and there's my husband's wife. They hadn't actually, completely divorced each other kind of thing. They were still kind of figuring it out. And I went right back to feeling like I was a girl sitting in the, principal's office, and boy, am I going to get in trouble for this. And Betsy just got up and she walked over to me in my car. And so I finally rolled my window down. I was really scared. And she said, Bill's sister, his only sister, Mary, you've met Mary, right? I said, yeah. You're still just looking out the window. Yeah. And she said, she just died in a car accident in Massachusetts. And Bill is completely falling apart. I can't comfort him. I think you could comfort him. And I could take your little boy home to my house, and I'll feed him dinner with Susie and my boys, and then you can come back and get him tonight, or if you want to come get him tomorrow morning. And I went, wow. Okay. And then I got out of my car, and I didn't feel so scared anymore. I didn't feel like a little kid anymore. Here was this amazing woman who had said, I think that you would be better to be with my husband now, than me. And I said, thank you. She said, I want to ask you a favor. She kind of folded her arms. She was a big feminist. She was like head of the AAUW and the BPW and the Women's League of Voters and the Democratic Party. She was just like a strong woman. And she said to me, can we be friends? Can we just be friends? We're Oprah girls. We're in the Oprah part of life. can we just be friends? I don't want my kids to have to, like, go to mom's dinner one time, dad's dinner another time. Can we just, like, do things together as a family, like we're one big family? And I went, I would love that. I would love that. I was from a big family, and I've been spending way too much time, you know, in a kind of family that wasn't like that. Thank you. And she said, I want to go to the funeral in Gloversville, because all the old Italian aunts know me, and we'll get to introduce them to you. Okay. Old Italian aunts, oh boy. But we walked down the aisle. I'll never forget it. We walked down the aisle, and there was the casket for Mary, and Bill was a wreck. This was his one and only sister, and he'd really kind of just become friends with her in adulthood. Kind of weren't very close as little kids, but he'd really learned to love her and be with her. We went skiing together, and she had a lake, and we all went boating together, and it was fun. But when the casket went down, and the kids were behind Bill, he had twin seniors, I think, and a junior son, a boy and a girl, they're twins, and a junior son. And he walked into the front aisle of the church, you know, the front pew, and they walked in, and there was room for about one more person. And Betsy took me by the arm, and she said, come on, Toots, let's sit them together and give them something to talk about. And I was just amazed. I was just totally floored. And we went in, and we sat down, and a couple of other teachers from our school district were there because they knew Bill, and maybe they knew Mary, and they definitely knew Betsy. And they were all going, you know, good job, you guys, good job. And suddenly, we were friends. We were friends. We just agreed to be women who had gone through, you know, some times that were hard. Hers were different from mine. But, you know, we had this guy in between us, and they were gonna get a divorce, and he tried to do it really well. He gave her the house, and he got that little apartment. But even though she'd been a big leadership person, it was very, very hard for her to work money. She didn't know how to work money. And she came over to my house one day, just by herself, and said, can you help me balance my checkbook? I don't really know how to balance my checkbook. And I went, sure, yeah, no problem. Let's get out your stuff, and, you know, we'll just sort of look at it. And that was a thing. And then she had a job that fired her one day, just right out of the blue. And she called me and said, can you come over to my apartment? Because by then she had an apartment. And it was, you know, kind of chaotic, but she said, nobody knows that I got fired. And I'm going to get evicted from this apartment, and I don't know what to do. And I said, let's get out the Gazette. Come on, we'll find you an apartment, and we'll find you a job. You know, we'll find you what you need. And from that point on, we were friends. We went to movies together. If Bill was out of town, sometimes we went out to eat together. We loved to drink together. We were, you know, we were just women that were friends. And we had a lot to talk about. You know, we talked about our kids, and we talked about how crazy this was, that we were friends. And then there were times when I could see that something was happening. Not just losing words, the way I'm losing words a lot in my life now, but sort of losing her train of thought and some stuff like that. And one night when we were sitting at a bar, and we were just talking a little bit, and she said, I have to tell you a secret. I said, it's okay. What's the secret? I'm losing my marbles. I said, well, yeah, we've kind of noticed. The kids don't know, do they? Yeah, they know. Did you tell them? No, I didn't tell them anything. I think they just know you're struggling, and we probably should get you some, you know, help, like from a doctor, like a neurologist or somebody who works with dementia or things like that. And she goes, no, 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 I don't want to do any of that. But it started going down more and started going down more. And so I helped her move from that apartment to a senior living place, and then I helped her move from the senior living place to the other senior living place that had a little more assistance. And finally, we got her into Glendale. And to this day, many, many, many years, like going on 40 years, I've been married now to Bill. I've been her friend who comes to see her at the nursing home and talks to her. And this year, her daughter, Susie, who was taking care of Brian, you know, came all the way from California, and we just spent like 2 or 3 days with her. And nothing she said could make much sense, but it was still Betsy. It was just Betsy, totally to the core, which had been diagnosed as Alzheimer's. And yet, physically, she's pretty healthy. I think we're going to have her with us for a long time. But she won't come out of Glendale. She won't come out. It's too frightening. It's too frightening. So, that story of we're Oprah girls, and we can fix this thing that has happened in our families, and we can love each other. And that's my story.
Thank you, Barney, for showing how people can be related by marriage. Definitely for the better. And thank you all for coming. We've heard 8 stories. We've had some wives and husbands. We've had some coffins. We've had rocks. We've had chipmunks. We've had some drinking along the way. A little bit of and a wonderful song that we didn't know we knew. So we hope you'll come next time for Wise Fools, 4 weeks from today on March 27th. And we're 22 days away from spring.
Yes.
So whether the weather gods really will pay attention to that, we don't know. But we're closer than we've ever been this year.